All right, let's turn our focus here now. Zimbabwe Exemption Permit Holders Association has filed court papers asking the Gauteng High Court to grant permanent residence to roughly 200,000 Zimbabwe Exemption Permit holders. The Zimbabwe Exemption Permit system, which allows Zimbabweans to work in South Africa, was suspended in December of 2021, then extended until the end of 2022 to give permit holders more time to apply for other permits or else face deportation or voluntary repatriation to Zimbabwe. Now, let's get the latest. We are now joined via Zoom by Advocate Simba Chitando, who is representing Zimbabwe Exemption Permit Holders Association. Advocate Chitando, thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. What are your fundamental concerns with South Africa's decision? You know, they've allowed a 12-month grace period to about 180,000 ZEP holders. As of several days ago, only a few visa waiver applications have been received. Has your client engaged the South African Department of Home Affairs before filing papers?
Thank you very much for having me on. The Zimbabwe Exemption Permit Holders Association made several attempts to engage with the Minister of Home Affairs before a decision was taken by the organization to challenge the Minister's non-decision at that stage. And eventually on the 24th of November, there was a decision to end the ZEP, and what has taken place now is the litigation is at an advanced stage. Court papers have been filed. There's a full set of court papers filed by the Minister, by the ZEPA, the organization I'm representing, and the Minister of Home Affairs. That's where we are. Unfortunately, the reason why I'm here speaking to you right now, there's a press statement by the Minister of Home Affairs saying that Zimbabwe Exemption Permit Holders Association has withdrawn its case against the Minister. That is not true. It's very important that I set that out immediately. It is false. The Minister was served with replying papers this week. The Minister is well aware, his lawyers are well aware that we are continuing with this matter. The only party that has withdrawn is African Amity, which is one of the other organizations. That's an NPC which was involved in the case. They've withdrawn because of intimidation. There's been a lot of xenophobic intimidation of not just African Amity, but the leaders of ZEPA. The lawyers, myself included, have been intimidated. And we believe that the press statement by the Minister saying that the matter has been withdrawn, days after he received the replying affidavit explaining the response to his court papers, is deliberate, and it is unfortunate. It's wrong. We also believe that the reason why he is saying that we have withdrawn is because the evidence in the case suggests that millions of rands, which Zimbabwean Exemption Permit holders have paid, has gone missing. The record of the court papers is damning. The Minister is in a lot of trouble. The Department of Home Affairs is in a lot of trouble to explain what has happened to all the money that's been paid to the Department of Home Affairs. Saying that we have withdrawn the case does not excuse him from the case. He cannot run away from this case. We're proceeding to apply for a court date very soon. And we will ask that the case be expedited. We'll ask for an expedited hearing. We're also working with several other organizations. You're well aware that the Helen Suzman Foundation has filed a court case of its own. And this statement from the Minister is to be read in light of what is taking place. He's under pressure and he's sending out false press statements, and he needs to be held to account for that.
And in fact, Advocate, according to your court papers, I mean, you describe the scheme as the largest case of fraud and theft ever committed by the government of one country over nationals of its neighboring country in African history.
Absolutely. There is no precedent like this ever. The Minister of Home Affairs' case is built on the allegation that Zimbabwean exemption permit holders are an expense to the state. We know for fact that every ZEP holder has paid, in the case of the ZSP, 890 Rand per applicant. This is for a successful and unsuccessful applicant. And when you do the maths, 890 multiplied by 200,000, you're talking about hundreds of millions of rands. The minister says that there is no money for ZSP, and yet the people have paid hundreds of millions of rands. What has happened to this money? The ZEP was 1,000 Rand, 1,100 Rand, 1,090 to be exact, I'm told. Also, about 180,000 people who have paid this money. This is the successful applicants, not counting the unsuccessful applicants. We're talking about several more hundreds of millions of rands. And yet the minister's papers say that they didn't have 140 million Rand to pay for the exemptions. They don't have the money. What has happened to the money? Zimbabwean exemption holders' money. It is unacceptable. He cannot receive court papers where we take him to task on this, and then he says that we're withdrawn. It's unacceptable. He has to answer for that. We'll be asking for a court date and sending out press statements where he pretends to be the friend of Zimbabweans, and we all know he's no friend of Zimbabweans. It's not going to help him.
Now,
he's under pressure, censored, and he has to now answer in court.
Advocate Chitando, now one of the reasons cited by the Department of Home Affairs, for suspending the ZEP scheme is its cost, and according to them, there is a fair assessment in terms of this process. So are you now accusing the Department of Home Affairs, and in particular the Minister of Fraud and Corruption?
I am definitely doing that, because that's exactly what we are seeing. We do the maths. What has happened to the money? We're talking about hundreds of millions of rands that has been paid by exemption permit holders. And the allegation is that this process is expensive for the state, but the exemption holders are paying for their process. They're paying for their own applications. Nowhere does he even deal with that in the court papers in front of us. So what he does instead is he says that we have withdrawn the case. Why would he say he's withdrawn the case days after he's received a replying affidavit where we accuse him of what you just said?
Now, I'm sure in your court papers you describe what this decision means for Zimbabweans living in South Africa. Talk to us about that. What are the implications?
The implications are very severe. It is the biggest, you mentioned earlier that this is the biggest, potentially the biggest fraud committed by one government against the people of another. There's no other way to explain it. Aside from the applications themselves, where hundreds of millions of rands have been paid, exemption holders have paid for property, fixed property, that they will not be able to access after the 31st of December 2022. What's going to happen to their property? This is unacceptable. This is just on its own. Their property is being almost expropriated by the state, by de facto expropriation of assets. This is, besides the fraud is one thing that's unacceptable, but the wanton disregard of the human rights, the children who are in schools, what's going to happen to them? They have to now go and find another school system. All the exemption holders have got children. Many of them have got children. What's going to happen to those children? What's going to happen to the financial arrangements? We've got the UIF issue. I was speaking to a ZEP holder yesterday, and I was told that this ZEP holder was let go and is now in Zimbabwe, and the cost of coming to collect the UIF is more than the UIF itself. So they've lost their UIF. We're talking about the defrauding of hundreds of thousands of people. It's unacceptable. the destruction of lives. So it's a travesty. It's a self-made humanitarian disaster.
Advocate Simba Chitando, thank you so much for your time this afternoon. Advocate Chitando is representing Zimbabwe Exemption Permit Holders Association.